Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today.
Went upstairs to the equivalent of a district commander, and I said, look, I've got a bit of a question. I want to, what should I do? And he said, go downstairs and do what I pay you to do. You're paid to be a manager, Dave. Go downstairs and be a manager. Make a decision, make a good decision, and stick to it. When someone has the worst day of their life, we can go and make it better. And not many people can actually do that. On a day where someone has, a fire in their kitchen, to us, it's a bread and butter job. But to them, it's the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And we can go along and make that day better. Not many people have that ability in their day-to-day jobs.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together.
G'day, Pete. Can you hear me, mate?
I can indeed, sir. How are you, my man?
Yeah, really good, thanks. Really good. Thankfully, my son's here and he got it all set up for me. So
he's a good egg.
He is a good egg. Yeah.
Well, he did have a hand in this. He needs to step up and take responsibility for it, to be honest.
Yeah. It's obviously set for a 30-year-old volume, not a 62-year-old volume. Yeah. No, that's really good. Got it now, I think.
I remember hearing something really interesting the other day. He says, as my hearing and my eyesight diminishes, my vision increases. And I thought that was an interesting way that he put it, because it was like, you just get a better perspective of life as your senses begin to fail you. And it was really like, it was quite an interesting perspective. I don't know where he got it from, because I think something like Dalai Lama or something came up with that.
Yeah, I more go for the one, as my hearing and sight go, my retention of stuff also goes. So you just sift out all the bullshit and you try and keep the important stuff.
Do you think that's what it is? Yeah. Do you think it's like a survival mechanism? We sift out the bullshit because they're like, I ain't got time for it.
I don't need that. Yeah. I remember later in my career, I was in charge of Wildfire. I had the Wildfire reference in Hampshire Fire and Rescue. And over in Queensland, before I left there in 2005, we started using leaf blowers rather than beaters. So you'd get this massive, great leaf blower and you'd walk along the leading face of we'd call them grass fires, and just blow the fire out. So we thought we'd try it in Hampshire, and I took it to a fire station that had a large number of small wildfires, as you might call them, and said, look, we're going to give you this leaf blower and you're going to use it for putting out grass fires. And that'll never work. All we're going to do is make it bigger. And I'm there, why is that? And they said, because we're just putting more air onto it. And you can never put a fire out by putting more air onto it. And I'm there, oh, okay. When you have your birthday and you've got candles on your cake, how do you put them off? How do you put them out?
Bloody hell, Dave. That is such a fantastic analogy.
Yeah, and they're going, oh, I said, it's a bigger version of that. And it worked absolutely ideal. I don't know exactly where they started, but we were using them in Queensland I left there 2005, so early 2000s, we were using leaf blowers.
Yeah.
So
and is that a case that
I don't know where it came from.
2 or 3 on an appliance on a specific vehicle, or did every vehicle have it as a sort of standard?
Everyone had one.
Really?
Yeah, they were a standard piece of equipment, and it basically became, what do we take off the appliance to chuck this blower on? and we'd do it seasonally. It's, when we were starting to get to the beginning of the grass fire season, we
Mhm.
would stow it on the locker and maybe take some hose off or whatever it might be, and it would stay on there for the season. So
That's crazy.
yeah, but
Love that.
early on in my career, you carry beaters on your
Mm.
fire appliance. We didn't. We carried burners, and so every grass fire we went to, if you couldn't put it out with with the hose, you backburnt it, and you wouldn't ever spend your time beating a fire. And I remember, early in the career, went to a fire, and it was only an acre or two, and we'd only send one pump to that. And we chucked in a big backburn of about 15, 20 acres, and
Jesus.
basically walked away from there saying we're never going to go back to this again this year, and because it had all just been burnt off.
Wow. So talk, because some people will know exactly what you're talking about, but to some people that will be a completely foreign concept still. They'll have seen it,
Yeah.
but they probably won't have been able to differentiate between that and arson when they're seeing some videos. So just talk us through the concept of a backburn, as obvious as it may seem, and what, if
So
any, sort of safety precautions people need to be putting in place when they're doing them.
see that's the difficult thing is where we did it as a matter of course, it was as simple as picking any sort of tool off the fire appliances. You'd pick the back burner off the fire appliance. And where I joined was in North Queensland, and we had lots of sugarcane up there. And each afternoon, all the cane farmers would burn their sugarcane ready for harvesting the next day. So seeing fires and back burning for a control of fire was exactly the same as what the sugarcane farmers were doing prior to harvesting, because sugarcane is nothing other than 20-foot tall grass, right? And so I was
Wow.
fortunate enough, I came from a harvest, I worked for a sugarcane farmer for a few years before I joined the fire service. So grabbing a burner and burning 20-foot grass in an evening was, yeah, just nothing. And if you got it wrong, the on the job training was basically you got a wet hessian bag across the back of the head with you idiot. We've now we've had a bit of a burnout. So
Yeah, but
moving on to the
how does
fire
that not
service.
become like, and maybe this is just a strategic way in which they plant their crop, but fires are easy to start, but as we all know, they can be quite complex and difficult to put out. So when a backburn or when these sugarcane farmers are doing these, we'll say strategically because obviously they know what they're doing, but
Yep.
there are not cases where it still goes wrong and it takes their property.
There are very, very limited cases. We would burn every day through the season. The season ran for about 6 months. We would at the most have one go wrong per year, but very, very rare. It's really rare occurrence. And that's simply because it's done in such a controlled way. You know where to start, you know how quickly, when to go slow, when to go quickly, and it all depends on the wind that's coming and the weather conditions at the time. And eventually it gets to the stage where the fire creates its own wind. So and it sucks the surrounding air into the middle of the fire, and you have a nice inferno to finish it all off, and then it
Wow.
all dies down. And the whole idea is to that create its own wind rather than having the prevailing weather.
Yeah.
And we then, you can transfer that skill quite easily over to firefighting, where you know at the right pace and the right measures, and with a lot of on the job training, you can light your back burn, whether it's a wide one or a thin one, whatever it might be, whether you do slowly or quickly, and until you get to the stage where it creates its own wind and it will just draw the fire into the center of the incident
Yeah.
and put itself out. So,
Wow.
so
That
we
is just
would
such a
quite
scary
easily,
concept for a lot of people in the UK fire and rescue service, I would imagine,
and
who are less
and
familiar
for
with it.
here, exactly, but you look at America, they use it so easily. In Australia, they use it a lot. A lot of the European countries, I know Spain, and them also use it. So it is a nice, easy way of doing it. And also, we wouldn't really wait until a fire was out. We would send a message to our control center of fire is burning safely within a perimeter, and leave it, because once you've burnt around the outside of a fire, it's not going to go anywhere. So it's just burning naturally in the middle of it, and you just walk away and leave it.
I know, I agree with you. And so he speaks about conditioning there. He speaks about training and sort of almost this aspect of self-discipline, because we just are so inexperienced in that approach to control burns and firefighting that would just trigger so many people with a fear of, what if embers and whatnot get lifted off the fire and carried over to the next field and all this sort of craziness.
And I think it comes down to, once again, resourcing. Where I joined the fire service in North Queensland, we had a main station and a substation. So we only had 2 appliances to call on for any incident. Wow. Our nearest whole-time station to the south of us was 200 miles away. Our nearest whole-time station to the north was 70 miles away. And we had no whole-time stations to the west of us. So you made do with really limited resources.
Yeah. So take me back for a second, because we're jumping around.
We are jumping around a lot.
No, in a wonderful way. I love that. But I want us to try and start at the beginning, so I can build a bit of an understanding from how I find you today. No, 100%. It's my fault. I always go straight into that rabbit hole. So, did you grow up in Australia, or were you UK based? Give us a little background around where you're from, siblings, family, and stuff.
Okay, right. I was born in Scotland in 1960. We emigrated to Australia in January 67. So we were the 10-pound Poms, right? So there was myself, mum and dad, my elder brother, who's a year older than me, and myself. My younger brother was 10 or 12 days old when we went out, and we've ridiculed him always that he went out as hand luggage, because he wasn't on the passenger manifest and he was carried as hand luggage. So
illegally smuggled in.
Yeah. So we emigrated to Australia. We went to a small, we thought
what
it
drove
was
the immigration
town,
through? What was your parents' thought process behind moving to Australia? Because it's a very popular thing for a lot of people to flirt the idea with, but it's a bigger commitment to actually do it.
Yeah, it was my mum and my dad. My dad's Scottish, my mum's German, both very set in their ways. And the way I hear it from other family is, dad applied for a job, didn't get it, had a hissy fit and said, right, I'm going to Australia. And knowing my dad, once that decision was made, or that statement was made, that's what was happening. So He worked as a farm manager over here, and he got a job with Department of Primary Industries over there, which is similar to DEFRA. Okay. So he got the job, and we were given a very short time which he had to go over there. So we flew out. It was a 2.5-day flight in those days.
Bloody hell.
Propeller plane, weren't jets then. So
was that your first time
because
flying?
It was the 10. Yes, it was. Yeah.
Imagine so.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah. And I don't remember any of it. Yeah, obviously I was only 6 at the time. But so we arrived there. We went from a British winter to an absolute heat wave over there. It was 100 and just over 100 degrees, we believe, when we landed.
Whoa.
So the first thing my older brother did was faint through the heat. But we were put into a migrant processing centre. We were there for a couple of weeks, and then we moved up to Kingaroy. And so I grew up as the young Pom in a rural Queensland school. So you very quickly assimilated and became Australian.
How different is the culture over there because it's surprisingly similar. I have found, with the exception that they don't take themselves quite as seriously, which is a nice and endearing quality I've found when I've spent time with Aussies.
Yeah, and it is exactly that. No one takes themselves seriously. I after about 5 years in the service, I came over here and did an international exchange back because that was back in the days when it was in vogue to do
Yeah.
an international exchange. So I did one over here to the UK, and I was used to calling all senior officers by first name. There was a very casual approach in the rank structure, and then to be basically pulled into line that you've got to stand at attention and in front of everybody above station manager and stuff like that. I found that quite unusual
Mm.
because people were taking themselves very seriously here, whereas we weren't so used to it over there. Um, but yeah, no one takes themselves seriously. And when you start to take yourself too seriously, there's always someone to take the piss. So,
Does that align at all to this aspect of the tall poppy syndrome? Are you familiar with that?
oh,
Because
without a doubt. Oh,
talk to
without
people
a
about that,
doubt.
because I've heard a lot with that, just from a rugby background and a rugby concept. But I think it's very applicable, and it's a great way to sort of keep the pulse check on a culture and ego and different talents, and it's a really good way of creating quite dynamic teams, I've found. But just talk us through the idea of it, because I know it's common.
It basically is that we have no um, concept of class or that one person is better than another. And as soon as someone starts seeing themselves as being above anyone, they're just brought back down to size. And it will be um, because you don't appreciate people putting themselves up above anyone else. We're all equal, basically. And that is the tall poppy. So they basically cut the poppies down to size through whatever means it's necessary to bring you back down to
I love that,
level
because yeah, it is very
headedness.
much a Western thing that we've always had this class structure, and it creates quite a lot of
Mm,
socioeconomic challenges, and it does bleed into organizations where there's an assumed respect for people. I'll give anybody my respect in terms of, like, holding doors open, being kind and courteous, and that
yep,
sort of
yep.
thing. But I don't think I should have deference to another individual just due to an arbitrary rank or something like that. I will still treat them as.
Yep.
I always say people, like, treat everybody fairly, but you don't necessarily have
Mm,
to treat them the same, because they're all unique individuals. I wouldn't
mm,
treat you the same way
mm,
as I'd perhaps treat your wife. I'd both treat you polite and
yep.
kind, but we would have a different
Mm,
rapport than I would have with your wife. But I don't
mm.
understand that aspect of sort of class and rank structure that
What,
we've always sort of adopted in the
what,
UK.
one of the best examples of it is not long after I got made up as an officer over there. I had basically a group trainer role. Okay, so one of the senior officers from our head office, or our regional office, which was about 200 miles away, came up and he was sitting with me one day and he was chatting about something, and I was just sitting there nodding, as you do when you're talking to a more senior officer. And anyway, he about halfway through a sentence, he stopped and he goes, "Dave, why are you nodding?" He said, "Are you agreeing with me?" And I said, "Yeah, I suppose so." And he said, "Why are you agreeing with me?" And I said, "Because you are, a senior officer and you know what you're talking about." And he goes, "Don't ever do that again."
I
He
like this
said,
guy.
"Don't ever agree with me simply because of my rank.
Mm,
Agree with me because you are agreeing with what I say.
mm,
If you don't agree with me, tell me. You know things that I don't know, and therefore never agree with me because of who I am." And I
mm.
thought, wow, Ian, that was really good. And it's ended up, as our careers developed and whatever, he became more senior and I cruised along quite happily at where I was. But I worked with him full time for a while. And it was one of the best experiences because all the time he was saying, "Dave, if you don't agree with me, challenge
Mm.
me appropriately, but challenge me. You know things, or you can see things from a different perspective than what I can.
Mm.
And he said, sometimes I've got knowledge that you haven't got, so we can sit and share that. But yeah, it was one of the most enlightening conversations I had. And years later, he was one of the assistant commissioners for the whole of Queensland. And I was in his office, and he had a sign up on the wall: the standard you walk past is the standard you accept.
Love
And
that.
at the time, I was station commander at a fire station in Hampshire. And I remembered that, and then I wrote it down. I put it up on our wall because it's so true. If you walk past a piece of litter on the ground and don't do something about it, you accept that that's okay.
Yeah,
And I
100%.
thought, yeah, he was a good mentor, that guy. But we've gone down another rabbit hole, haven't we?
No, mate, I love it. I once heard it described as the hippo's opinion, and everyone and people, or a certain mentor that I had, he said, try and avoid agreeing with the hippo. And the hippo was just an acronym for the highest paid person's opinion. He said, don't just agree with the hippo. You know, as soon as that person stands up in the room and spouts their opinion off, so many people will, because they're the highest paid person there, have that fear of being ridiculed, or fear of retribution, or fear of like ramifications professionally. And I think it's certainly gone against me in many ways, to be a healthy objector at times. But I think it's a crucial part when we speak about like diversity and innovation. If you want to innovate, or if you want to be diverse, you've got to also have diversity of thought. You've got to have those different opinions. You've got to have those different approaches and perspectives. Because like you say, something that's viewed from a firefighter's level to a district manager to a chief fire officer to all different levels of the service, they will see something through a different lens. And it's important to capture that, so we don't suffer from bias and groupthink and things like that. So how old were you when you actually first joined, and what was the process like over there?
I first joined at 30, so I was a late joiner. And in those days, you had to be below the age of 31. So I was quite lucky to sneak in.
Wow.
And the process here was very similar to what it is here. You put in your application, the applications are sifted. I found out subsequently there were 500 of us applied at the time I applied. 3 of us actually got jobs, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying the 3 of us were the best, because with that many applications, it becomes to luck. And the 3 of us who were taken on, I firmly believe, were lucky. The process was quite similar. We had to do a functional fitness test, not so much fitness, but functional test to make sure you could actually hold a branch, haul stuff aloft, climb ladders, that type of stuff, and an interview and a series of mechanical reasoning. There was a mechanical reasoning test. What else was there? A maths test, an English test, that basic sort of stuff, which I think is quite similar to what the UK was doing.
I'm hopeful they still do a lot of mechanical reasoning. Mechanical reasoning came in here maybe like 2 decades ago, and then it kind of fell by the wayside a little bit, and we did suffer the consequences of it. We came in with people that just didn't have a tactile, kinesthetic approach to learning things. Like they just weren't. They couldn't couldn't transfer their thoughts into their hands. They weren't dexterous, and they couldn't just to, like you say, have a mechanical understanding of, if I push down on this in this sequence of cogs, what's going to happen at the other end, and just
exactly
looking at something and seeing, that's a door. Give me 3 ways I could get through that door. Just little, just pivot and fulcrum and load and things like that, which again, kind of echoing back to the beginning of our conversation, I think those are things that are fading in life. Like I gave just a silly little example, but I gave my my son's friend who was helping with some gardening at our house the other day, and I gave him an extension cable, and I said, just extend that. I just made one cable up, and I gave him this cable, and I said, just run that out, and we're going to go around the other side now. And it was one of the winds up on the side. So he assumed that you had to unwind it using the handle, which is not too, it's not a hell of a mistake to make. But obviously, on a drum, you just pull it off a drum. You try and roll it, you try and wind a drum backwards. You just get the cable in a whole goddamn complete mess on the inside. And that is such a silly little example, but it's an example of like, wow, you just didn't know that. Someone's clearly never, and that's absolutely fine. We just rectified it and showed them how to do it. But little things like that, I think most children don't have an understanding for these days, how to put things together, how to take things apart. It's another skill set that I worry we're losing a bit.
Yeah, I think as you could become more and more a throwaway society, you don't have to learn how things work or how things are put together so that when they break, you can fix them and whatever. I was lucky. I had when I was a watch manager equivalent, there was a guy on the truck with me who was a mechanic for a world superbike team. Wow. Right. And I said, oh, you must be great at fixing things. And he said, we never fixed anything. He said, if something was broken, we threw it away. We put a brand new one on. And I thought, oh, yeah, never thought of that. But he said, I'm pretty good at pulling stuff apart and putting it back together. But he said, I've never fixed anything in my life.
I think, sadly, like that innovation, that creativity kind of comes out of place of necessity. Well, they say that necessity is the father of invention, don't they? So we often only become curious about things when we truly need to be. And like you say, we've accidentally took ourselves into a strange place of abundance and disposable environments where people aren't, looking inside their own vehicles. They don't need to save an extra 5 or 10 quid sometimes to learn how to change their own tire or learn how to disassemble the front headlight and change the bulb out themselves. They just throw it away and they'll just ask somebody else to do it.
Well, that's the thing. If you can go to Halfords and have someone put a new headlight bulb in your car for 3 quid, a lot of people say, well, that saves me the time of learning to do it myself. But you see, I
went through bleeding radiators. So it's really sad. Like now it's getting cold in the UK. I went round our house the other day, bleeding radiators with my 10-year-old, because just little things like that. I'm like, tiny little life skill. Just know that when you look at a radiator, what is it? How does it work?
Yeah.
There's water in that. So the water's coming in one side, it's going out the other side. It's actually got 2 other valves on it. What are they doing? And again, I know I'm getting into things, people might be rolling their eyes, but I'm like, little things like that. Some people just look at something like electricity. I always say, so few of us ever understand electricity. It doesn't stop us benefiting from it. We just walk into the corner of the room, flick a switch, and it just happens. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in it by any stretch of the imagination, but I like to have a conceptual understanding of how the electricity gets to my house and how it's roughly produced. But is that just me being sad and romantic? I don't know.
But I think firefighters should be inquisitive. How does it work? Why does it work? When this happens, why did it happen? And because it helps us throughout our career and generally helps us, come up with excuses why we broke something at the station. But because I had a friend who was an engineer, and he said, if he ever made something, he'd give it to a firefighter and say it can't be broken to test if it was indestructible, because they will break anything. And the excuses are, I didn't break it. It was broken when you gave it to me, or someone else did it. Generally, are the main excuses used. But no, you've got to be inquisitive. But going back a bit, right? Okay, so grew up in rural Queensland, joined the fire service at 30, went on a
Why did you join?
To Brisbane.
Why did you want to join?
I was unemployed. I was working seasonal work on a sugarcane farm, applying for every permanent job in the newspaper. And the fire service came up. I had a colleague who had joined the fire service, and it was basically, if he can do it, so can I. And I fell into the fire service, and I wish I'd done it 10 years beforehand. And I wish I could have stayed in longer than I did. So, It was absolutely amazing. The opportunities that the fire service can give you are just limitless. To work in 2 countries for 15 years each, do an international exchange, I was fortunate enough. I was sent to America 3 times on exchange. There's just so much that's open to us. All
Yeah.
you got to do is look for it and put yourself in the path of opportunity. But yeah,
That's a
went
big
to a
point.
recruitment
Sorry, yeah,
course.
that is a big point. Putting yourself
Yeah,
in
yeah.
that path of opportunity. So many people say no to things they don't even know what they're saying no to. Do you know what I mean? We fear that like doing
Oh,
one thing now means doing it forever, and you're like, no. If you don't like it in six
yep.
months or a year, fucking do something else. Apply for something else.
Yeah,
Especially
yeah.
now, things are
And it
changing
is
so
that.
fast.
And that's it. I see myself. We were the last of the dinosaurs. We joined a fire service that was so different to what it is now, and that's in one career. We never did any community safety. We had stand down on weekends. We had stand down on public holidays.
Yeah,
We were the old fashioned fire service. We've seen it in our career come to where it is now, and it's only a positive thing.
yeah.
The days of having a bar at work, having cooks at work, the idea that you can come to a night shift and have a couple of pints and that's acceptable is just so far beyond where a modern fire service is. But
Yeah.
that's the way it was. Yeah,
Mm.
it is amazing what's happened in just the space of one career. But like I said, I think the guys of my ilk are the last of the dinosaurs. Yeah,
100%. So
yeah.
you worked in Brisbane to start with, or you moved to Brisbane, sorry?
I went to Brisbane for the recruit course. It was 600 miles away, and they flew us home 3 times during our recruit course. Other than that, you were um, down there doing your recruit course. It was as simple as that. So that was an interesting
So did you have
experience.
children by this time? Sorry.
Um, I had a daughter from a previous
Okay.
marriage, so she was living with a mum, and I had just married my current wife. Yeah,
Wow.
yep.
And then off you went to do the long
So
training course, and it's a lot of time away from home for some people, especially at that age, because we have a lot of
it,
people
it
joining now
is.
in 30s and 40s, and it's a lot of
Mm,
time away from home.
yeah, and yeah, it is. But that was just what you had to do,
Mm.
and being in Queensland, that's we appreciated. That's what you have to do. And to give some idea of scale, 7 UKs will fit into Queensland, so it's a big place.
That's what I mean, because when you say,
So
200 miles away is the closest station, people wouldn't necessarily think twice about. I know we've spoke to a couple of Aussie firefighters and stuff like that, and especially from New Zealand as well. And a 2-hour commute to
mm,
work is an acceptable thing for some of them. They're like, "Yep, that's
mm,
I'll leave that time in the morning and off I go." And I just think, wow, if you said that to somebody in the UK, some people would just laugh you out of the room because we're just so conditioned to a smaller, just a smaller country, a smaller village, shorter commutes and
yep,
efficiency. That
yep.
we almost makes you soft in a way, I suppose.
Well, when I was over on holidays a few weeks ago, I drove from my brother's place up to my daughter's place, and that was a 10-hour drive. And so that's just a day's drive. And for anyone there, that's not out of the ordinary. You
Yeah.
just accept that as being the way it is. We went to the south coast of Australia one time for holidays, and we were closer to Antarctica than we were to our house when we were down there. So, and to give some, we measured it and put it to a UK perspective, because we had family over here, and we said, look, imagine driving to Moscow for your holidays. That's the distance we've just done.
Wow.
So,
So give me a little breakdown
yeah.
about like living conditions and things like that, because over here obviously we're a lot less lucky with land and things like that, or we're just more densely populated. Was it a standard thing for people out there to have like a nice big yard? What was growing up like there, and as you were obviously moving
It's
into your 30s?
Yeah, it was growing up there was just what I consider to be idyllic. It was a small town back in the 70s. We would leave, on our bikes first thing in the morning and we'd get home at dark. There was days before mobile phones, but being in a small town, everyone knew what you were up to. So that had its good and its bad.
Yeah.
Whatever mischief we got up to, the parents always found out about it. But as we grew older and we started getting cars and things like that, that there was the bad issue that we had loads of car accidents. I
Really?
remember, yeah, we went to 3 funerals before we went to our first wedding. Just that time, and that was just the way it was. But it still was an amazing time and an amazing place to grow up in. It was a bit of the Wild West type culture, but it was a ton of fun. But those days aren't there anymore. My lads have said, "Oh, we'd love to go back over there and see what you did." And I'm there, but it's not the same anymore because it's 50, 60 years later,
Yeah.
and you can't hark back to what was because it just isn't there anymore.
Yeah.
But joining the fire service over there was just amazing. Once again, when I was over there recently, a stack of us, they have monthly get-togethers of the grumpy old firefighters, and it was great to just to sit around and have a chat about the good old days as you do. But they said once again, it was the end of an era because the fire service itself just couldn't remain the way it was. The fire service has to move on. And you spoke about the tall poppy. We had a firefighter who got promoted up through the ranks at the station and got very full of himself, and we used to call him Fig Jam. And is that a term you know here?
Fig Jam, no. Hit me with it.
Yeah, fuck, I'm good. Just ask me. And so he became known as Fig Jam, except he didn't know what Fig Jam meant. And he started introducing himself as, "Oh, they call me Fig Jam." And we're just here shaking our heads, "Mate, you should find out what a nickname means before you start using it." But yeah, he was the antipode of a tall poppy. He had to be brought down to size. And we got back from a fire call one time. We were driving into the fire station, and he went to climb out of the officer's seat, and the driver just said, "Oi, just wait here a moment. We're going to have a word with you." And basically, he says, "If you behave like that at another fire, we're going to hang you out to dry. You remember, we know what we're doing. We know what we're talking about. Don't treat us like children." Yeah. And I thought that was another thing which stuck with me as I went through the career. You've got to treat all your colleagues as adults. Don't treat them as children because they know what they're doing. Or the vast majority of us know what we're doing.
Most people, when they have those first few steps into promotion, really struggle with how they think they should behave. Some people think they need to change. Some people think they need to adapt. But like you were sort of alluding to there, the fire service was here long after we arrived, and it will be here long after. Most of the time, things will happen safely, even if you're not there. But what are some of the common mistakes that you saw those new officers making? And when you first transitioned into a leadership role, how was that for you?
I remember thinking when I joined, or when I first got made up, what if the firefighters don't do what I ask them to do? And that was just my biggest fear, that you're going to say, can you go out and test the hose? And they'll just go, no. And you're thinking, hang on a sec, now what do I do? It's sort of ish when you first become a parent. What do I do if my child just says no?
Well, it's even harder than that because you can't just, some people can just grab a child and smack them or send them to their room. But with firefighters, it really is.
It's frowned upon with firefighters, isn't it?
Yeah, they don't appreciate it. I've had a couple over my knee before and they didn't enjoy it. It didn't go well.
No. But it was that fear, and it basically comes to realization, don't ask them to do anything unreasonable and you won't have that problem. If you keep your requests reasonable, they'll do what you ask, and become a leader rather than a manager, I think, is probably another thing. But one of the other great things, I was at a quandary one day at work about a problem we had, went upstairs to the equivalent of a district commander, and I said, "Look, I've got a bit of a question. I want to, what should I do with this issue?" And he said, "Go downstairs and do what I pay you to do." And I'm there, "What?" And he said, "You're paid to be a manager, Dave. Go downstairs and be a manager. Make a decision, make a good decision, and stick to it. He said, I will always back every decision you make, unless it is the most ridiculous decision I've ever seen. But he said, you're paid to be a manager. Go and do it. And I thought, well, that was a really nice freedom to be given, that I didn't have to worry about what was coming from above, because he had my back. And I know when I became a station commander, I took all my managers, when I got there, one at a time in, and said, be a manager, make a decision. Don't worry about what I think about your decision, because if I disagree with it, we'll sit and we'll discuss it. Like I said with the other guy, you might have seen things differently to me. You might have more experience or a different perspective than me, but we'll sit and we'll discuss it. Unless it is the most dumb fuck decision I've ever seen anyone make, then we might have a bit of a different chat. But remember, at all times, I've got your back.
That's so important, because there's nothing more
worrying. Never know that I disagree.
Yeah, there's nothing more worrying than a leader that's not confident. I always think things like self-awareness, empathy, and confidence, a bit of command presence in there perhaps as well, are some really important factors for people stepping into leadership roles in the fire service, because you can be the most intelligent, the most experienced, the most well-read individual, but if you can't make a decision confidently, or if you can't get respect from your crew, or if you can't build rapport with them, you're going absolutely nowhere. And the fact that you may or may not be right is almost completely irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly. And going back to decision making in a command situation, this guy Fig Jam did give me one of the best nuggets I've ever had, and that was when he was teaching me command. He said, before you make a brave decision, run the words through your head of, what would I say at the subsequent inquiry? And I thought that was really good, that because 99% of our decision making at fires is based on, I've seen this before.
Yeah. Intuition.
But every now and again, you think, I've got to make a decision I haven't made before. Now, if you start thinking, well, this might work, run through your head, what would you say at the subsequent inquiry? And I have done it a couple of times, and you go, no, we're going to go the safe option here, and this is what we're going to do. It sort of just focuses you again, because if you have to think, well, I can bullshit my way through it, it's not the right decision to be making, is it?
No. And you might get away with it 9 out of 10 times as well, is the problem. And you can see that. People can learn bad habits just making poor decisions and actually relying on the fact that they've just got a team of fantastic firefighters. But that one time when your decision really is the crucial one that needs to be made and relied upon, you've got to have enough self-awareness to be able to rationalize that thought and say to yourself, how would I justify this decision process? What is my justification for it? Because we can have a bit of investment bias, like you've gone so far down one route of a plan, you've gone so far down your thought process that you almost start attaching yourself to the thought process. Like I always say, I'm not married to any decision, I'm not married to any opinion. I always say it's important to have strong opinions weakly held. And what I mean by that is, I will assert myself and I will explain to you why I believe my decision is the right one. But if you can demonstrate to me why it's not, I will let it go like something I have no value for whatsoever. But I also will test your opinion. You know what I mean? I'll poke holes, or I will poke, just to see what your opinion is, to see if it's actually not made of paper. I want to see that Dave believes in what he says.
Yeah, I remember when we had our initial command assessments. An important part of it was a debrief. So you would sit in front of the assessors for half an hour or so, and you'd run through the incident, and you would have to explain each decision that you made during the course of that incident. And that's all fine. But their favorite tactic of saying was, why did you make that decision? if you had the opportunity again, would you change that decision? And so that's really questioning, are you able to change it? And if you say, yes, I did. Oh, so you made the wrong decision, did you? No, I'd just make a different decision. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just a different decision. And, Pete's way of fighting a fire might be different to my way of fighting a fire. But in the end result is the fire still goes out, or you might end up with a car park. It doesn't, that's inconsequential. But we've just got different ways of achieving the same.
What we've moved to a lot in the UK, and I know perhaps your son will have a bit of an insight into this, is we've tried to come back more in line with the term guidance. So we like to offer guidance to our incident commanders and to our firefighters in the UK Fire and Rescue Service. And what that hopefully does is give them autonomy in their strategies and tactics, because some people got so focused, 10 or 15 years ago about doing one thing a certain way, even if they weren't getting a result. Do you know what I mean? Rather than this is the rough guidance I need to follow, and the strategies and tactics within that are of my own sort of decision making and my own experience and dependent on the crew and the resource and the equipment that I've got with me, versus that more prescriptive, fixed mindset of there's only one way to do everything.
And because you end up having a policy for everything. You might have hundreds of policies, and you're trying to fight a fire within policies. And an example is, we got sent to, when I was watch manager, we got sent to a car in a flooded river, and all you could see of the car was the boot sticking out and a tow hitch on the back of it. And we said, is anyone still in it? And they said, we don't know. So we think, the last thing you can do is just leave it there for the tow drivers to recover and then find that there's bodies within it. So we used a teleboom basically to teabag a firefighter out to it, and he put a tow hitch from a tow truck driver over the tow ball, and we pulled the car out of the flooded river. Now, that went outside policies, because you aren't allowed to basically dangle a firefighter off the end of a teleboom. So I was taken to regional headquarters for a please explain. And I said, well, I couldn't think of any other way of doing it. What are you supposed to do? Send a firefighter swimming into a flooded river to put a tow, to put this line on there? And they said, no. And I said, but they said, what you did was wrong. And I'm there, okay, I accept what I did was wrong, but tell me, how would have you done it? No, that's not the point. And I'm thinking, well, how can you tick me off if you can't give me a better way out of it? You weren't the one standing there with the police and the ambulance and members of the public trying to come up with a way of solving this problem. You're sitting here comfortably in your office. And that's what I really liked about Hampshire Fire and Rescue when I went there, was one of the, I think it was assistant chiefs or deputy chiefs, said, we will never criticize a decision made by an officer from the comfort of an armchair. And I thought that was a really good thing for them to have, that, if anything goes wrong, in inverted commas, we'll have a look at it, we'll discuss it, but we'll never say that's the wrong decision. And that's a good philosophy, I think, for any manager or any service to have, that it's easy to sit in your comfortable air-conditioned office in your armchair going through it. You're not the one who was standing in front of a building or in an incident with a perspective, from other members of the public or whatever, that you've got to come up with a good idea.
Yeah, I think the sort of value and or frequency at which things like strategic debriefs or even just tactical debriefs are held in organizations is a great indicator as to the level of trust and sort of willingness to learn from that organization, because some places you see barely any. And I've often found that that correlates to a lack of trust in that organization, because people aren't willing to say, they're not willing to give a true account of what they actually did at the incident, because they're fearful of retribution, because they don't have, a sort of culture of trust, I suppose.
Yeah, and there's also the self perspective. Yeah, you do some of your best reviewing of an incident when you're sitting in the fire appliance going back to the station, or you're sitting in your officer's car going back, to the station or to your home, thinking. And I don't think you can ever get to the stage, or you shouldn't ever get to the stage of saying, I nailed it, I couldn't have done that any better, because we can always do even just that 1% better. Yeah, I think it comes back to that tall poppy thing. If you think you can, go to a job and get it 100% right, your head's getting a bit, your ego's getting a bit bigger.
100%. So how long did you spend in Queensland? How long did you spend in the service of that? You said you did 15 years.
Yeah, 15 years. So I was there from 1990 to 2005. And what it basically was, that the reason we came over is one of those things where one thing leads to another, to another, to another. And we were going to come over for, my grandmother was turning 100 years old at the end of 2005, right? And my wife's from Somerset. She'd lived in Australia for 16 years. And we said, oh, we'll go back for grandma's birthday. And over there, our long service leave, we don't get it added to our holidays each year. At the end of 10 years, you basically qualify for 3 months off work. So you can have a 3-month holiday, which is really good. Also, our shift system there was we didn't apply for holidays. We got our holidays. You did 30 tours and then you had 5 tours off, right? So if you wanted to have a holiday other than what was gazetted to you and your 5 tours off, you had to find someone who's got holidays at the time you want and swap some time with them. But it was 30 tours on, 5 tours off, which
5 tours,
initially
about a month,
we didn't.
then?
About 6 weeks, 6 weeks and 2 days, I think 5 tours comes to. So that was really good. We loved that system because you just swap with people and make it work to yourself. But you could also plan 7 years in advance as to when your holidays were going to be, because that's how long the program ran for. Excuse me. So what you could also do was defer your holidays 1 year and take double holidays the next year.
Wow.
So we thought, well, I've got my long service leave, I've got 1 year's leave, I'll defer another year's leave, and you end up with about 5 months off on full pay, or you can take 10 months off on half pay. So you can see how this is snowballing.
Bloody hell.
We thought, oh, well, we'll come over and we'll tour Europe and one thing or another. And then it became a case of, well, I don't really want to just be on holidays for 6 months. How about I apply for a job with a fire service and we see what happens? Because I'd done an exchange with Somerset Fire and Rescue, and I had a fair idea what the fire service was like over here.
So you'd already done an exchange with Somerset, sorry.
Yeah, so after about 5 years in the job, I did a 12-month exchange in Taunton. So
were these really popular back then? Because 5 years into the service, to do a 12-month exchange is quite a period of time.
It had its positives and negatives. When I first joined at my recruit course, they were talking about a firefighter who went to America for a year, and we thought, yeah, that's quite interesting. And that's where most of the exchanges were being done to. I remember I'd been in the job about 4 years. We got an ad, a guy in the Yukon somewhere wanted to do a 12-month, and he wanted to come to North Queensland. We thought that's all right until we saw the temperature of -40 where he actually lived, and thought, no, I don't want to go there at all. And for some reason, he couldn't get anyone to leave, North Queensland, where we've got the Barrier Reef and all that, to go to -40 degrees during for 8 months of the year or whatever. But anyway, so because I had family over here in the UK and my wife was from Somerset, I applied for a exchange program to a number of services, and I got a guy from Somerset who was interested in coming over. And then you got the whole thing of getting the service to agree with it, and then the fire authority and all sorts of, as you can imagine, the bureaucracy and bullshit that goes with it. But yeah, it did 12 months.
So would it be a case that you would swap lives with them? Would they come and live in your home then, or?
They live in your house. They have your car. We left our two dogs with the guy.
Bloody hell.
So it is basically you walk out and they walk in. So we left our house with the swimming pool, air conditioning. I think we had air conditioning at that time, and two dogs and a tenant. We had a lodger. So we left them all with this family and we moved into a 450-year-old house in the Quantocks. So it was a massive, great change. But it was also, I remember I said, we were quite isolated provincial city to then be dropped into Taunton, a watch of 16 firefighters, aerial appliances, all that sort of stuff. So it was quite a change
Yeah.
to what I was used to also. So yeah, Dave had a great time over there. And it was also at a time when we planned it, the dollar to pound exchange rate was pretty good.
Okay.
But then the dollar plummeted. And because I was still paid by Queensland, he was paid by here. I lost about 50% of my disposable
Jesus.
income. And to start off with, this is back in the days of teletext. The
Yeah.
firefighters used to put the exchange rate up on the telly. Oh, look, Dave, it's dropping. And then after a couple of months, they go, this isn't funny anymore, is it? And I'm there, no, it's not funny at all. Because you plan the 12 months with it being, this is how much money I've got coming in. And then to have it just eroded by the exchange rate was really difficult. But them's the breaks. It was still.
Yeah, you went with your partner, and
Yep.
do you have any children by that time?
We had a young son at that stage. Chris was 4, so he went to the local school, and it was a wonderful experience. We were in a little village called Kingston St Mary, just outside Taunton. So it was the quintessential Somerset village life. The local vicar was also an Australian, and there was a Quantock Ranger who was also on a 12-month exchange. So we had an Australia Day barbecue in January when it was -2, and just stuff like that. It was good having a couple of Australians around. And like I said, Dave had an absolute ball in North Queensland. He loved it. He didn't want to come back at all.
No, I've found that with quite a few people that have done exchanges to Australia now, but it's also quite difficult for people to work on like a point system over there now, because some people really struggle to be able to make that move. They've certainly tightened up the way that they're doing things, haven't they?
Yeah, it's especially to go into the fire service because it's exactly the same as here. It's a very difficult occupation to get into. That it's not one of the preferred occupations. So you've either got to have money or have family contacts or whatever. And we all know Australia is not an easy country to get into, to migrate to.
Which I think is a good thing as well. Otherwise, you just end up, I mean, there's pros and cons to having very loose and open borders. But I think so many of us focus on the fact that you can just end up with, you can take on a lot of things.
Full of riffraff.
Yeah, you just fucking end up having anybody around, don't you? And you just think, fucking hell.
Yeah, we've got enough of us over there already.
That's what I'm saying. So you've done that first exchange, and then it obviously hadn't deterred you completely, because then at that sort of 15 mark, when you'd had all this time off, you decided to get employed again.
That's right. And it was just as the government brought out a white paper saying that there's got to be multi-tier entry, there's got to be it was basically one of the first reports, I believe, into the fire service that you've got to expand your horizons and take people from elsewhere.
Okay.
So I wrote to 7 fire brigades or fire services asking whether they would take me as a firefighter. Hampshire was the only one who came back and said, not yet, but we might. No, that's right. I asked as an officer. Hampshire said, not yet, but it's something we're considering, and everyone else said no. So there was a couple of non-uniform jobs with Devon Fire and Rescue I applied for, and so I became their first home safety manager, because it's when the government had that 26 million they gave the fire service to put up smoke alarms.
Yeah.
So I got a non-uniformed job with them. I brought paperwork documenting all of my competencies over with me, and then started the very difficult path of trying to get them to recognize my competencies. And I referred to the government white paper, and they said that might be a government policy, but it's not ours. And I had years of grief to try and get back into uniform. In hindsight, it was worth it, but it wasn't easy.
No, I was going to say that difficult decision to actually become, Green Book and decide not to no longer be a part of the operational capacity.
Yeah.
It's quite a big one, because I've thought at times, there's different areas of the services that I'd love to explore, but they're not operational roles, and a lot of them aren't open to operational individuals. Like, I've got a massive fascination with human behavior, and I think there's lots of steps forward that can be taken with some of the way that we manage human resources and organizational development. But so many of those roles aren't for operational staff. And I suppose I don't quite have the guts like you did to actually step out of an operational role. And almost, did that not feel like a step backwards in ways?
Oh, without a doubt. And it was, I was lucky. Queensland said, we'll hold your job for you.
Wow.
That manager I said that was my mentor ended up being in charge of the region. And he said, look, I'll give you a year off. So if it all turns to shit, you can come back. And it ended up, I had a year and a half before I actually resigned from Queensland. So that was good. We always had that fail safe.
Why did you want to move then? Why were you so focused on coming to the UK?
Lynn's family were getting a bit older, so we thought we'd just come back from her grandmother's 100th, and Lynn being closer to her family, and we love the UK. There's nothing wrong with the UK at all. We liked the education system. We liked being close to Europe because my mum's German. I've got a massive family in Germany. We like going to see them, and you're not comparing like for like. Australia has a lot to offer, which the UK hasn't, but the UK's got a lot to offer, which Australia hasn't. And a friend in America once said, what do you like best? And I said, I can't compare the two. And he said, oh, it's like comparing apples to sausages. And I said, that's probably the best analogy you can come up with. They're both food, but they're nothing the same. So we were quite happy to come back. We had done a year's tester, so to speak, and we thought, why not? One of those things. Why not? What could possibly go wrong? And my wife, where she was working over there, she was the accountant for a bus company, but the ultimate owner of the bus company lived near where we do in Devon. So when we moved over here, when I got the job and we moved over here, we moved to Newton Poppleford, and he said, oh, I live nearby there with it. What a surprise. And he employed her over here. So it all sort of ish fell into place. But the road of grief to get back into uniform was really difficult. It was at the time when we were doing ADCs. And they said, oh, yes, you could go for an officer's job if you were in uniform and had an ADC. So I joined the local RDS. So I was Green Book working in retained. So for later on in my career, it gave me a good perspective of being retained and being Green Book also, which can only help. I had to
how
get
would
my
you have been then? You'd have been...
competencies.
It must, by the time you got back into an operational role, would you have been 47, 48?
Yeah. High 40s. Yeah, because I turned 50 as I was made station commander over at Havant. Yeah, so I was high 40s, 47, 48. Yeah, you're about right.
And what rank would they have given you back? Were you taken back in as a firefighter, or were you allowed to come in as a JO?
I ended up going back as a firefighter. Even though I got an ADC because Hampshire said, oh, we're going to do an ADC for station managers and we're going to allow non-uniform people to apply. Would
Yeah.
you like to apply? So I did, and I was lucky enough to be successful. So I went back to Devon and I said, look, I've got a station manager's ADC, nationally recognized level. Can I apply for a job here? And they said no. They said it's not our policy. So I had a chat to the chief officer and I said, with one stroke of your pen, you can allow me to apply for a job with Devon Fire and Rescue. He said, yes, I can, but I'm not going to. And you think,
Yeah.
bugger me. Okay, a new path.
So,
and yeah, you just think it was a case of obstacles were being placed in your way because I had to pay for someone independent to cross match all my competencies. The first quote was £4,500, and it
Jesus.
ended up I got someone that they agreed to do it for about 500 quid. So there were all these, it just became one obstacle after another, and I did their RDS to whole time
Yeah.
transfer, and I ended up
Migration.
on the back seat. Yep, on the back seat of a fire appliance in Plymouth, which was a nice experience. Again, the FBU said they weren't prepared in taking up the case simply because there was no value in it, basically. So
To
you're
them.
basically stuck on your own.
Hmm.
And I had my ADC from Hampshire. I wrote to them and I said, are you going to offer me a job, or was this just a tick box exercise for you? And because basically I had nothing to lose at that stage.
Yeah, yeah.
And 2 weeks later, they offered me a job.
Wow. So you were moving again.
Moving again. I left the family here in Devon and I went over to Havant, and they were the best years. I loved it there.
Really?
It was a great station. It was a really good station. Wonderful guys working with me. And to the point that for the last number of years I was there, we didn't have anyone leave the station, and we had a waiting list of people wanting to come to the station. So we called it Happy Haven't. And I had a great belief in, if the guys are happy at work, you'll get the best out of them.
100%.
And it was. We had a really good time. And Hampshire was good. They gave me the role of Wildfire Officer. I never, to the end of my career, worked out what that role meant, but it did mean that they never knew. I kept on asking, what responsibilities are we to have for this? And they just said, oh, no, you're just a Wildfire Officer. And we had them for other disciplines also. But
Yeah.
I got a phone call one day from one of the assistant commissioners of saying, oh, we'd like you to take a team to Oregon to learn about wildfires. And I'm there, yeah, okay. And I had to ask my son, do you know where Oregon is? So we had to get the map out and find out where Oregon actually was. And yeah, it was the first of 3 trips to a small fire department in Oregon. And it was just amazing. So the exchange was to Sisters Camp Sherman Fire Department, and it is a small fire department in Sisters in Central Oregon. And it ends up, we now do annual exchanges to Sisters, and they send firefighters to Hampshire each year.
Oh, wow.
because because the first year we went, there were 5 of us went, and it was just amazing. We learnt so much. They took us to an 80,000 acre fire, which
Oh,
was just incredible. So the guys, they sent a task force out to it. The firefighters got to do some firefighting out there on this big fire. There was myself and another one of the watch managers got to ride with an air attack supervisor for 3.5 hours.
wow.
So when they do aerial firefighting, they have basically a sector commander in an aircraft above at 2,500 feet, with everyone, with the other assets doing aerial firefighting below.
Yeah.
And it was one of the highlights of the career, because as we're climbing into the helicopter, the guy said, do you guys get airsick? We're there. No. And he said, I'll give you 2 bags each. And so, so we're up there. And for the first hour and a half, it was proper fire service. He was giving us a really good lecture on how to do aerial firefighting, explaining what he had done in previous flights, what each aircraft, the big tankers had done, what the little helicopters were doing, all that sort of stuff. Absolutely brilliant, really good. But then, like all fire officers, we've only got a limited attention span, haven't we?
Yes.
Right? So an hour and a half was obviously his attention span. And the pilot said, we'll show you the capabilities of this aircraft. And he took us over the edge of this cliff and just nose down to the ground a couple of 1,000 feet, pulled us up at the bottom, and off we went. And he goes, how was that? With that? Yeah, that's pretty good. Then he goes, oh, look, some mountain goats. And he went off chasing these mountain goats. And that thing, he says, oh, mountain lions. And he's backing this helicopter along this cliff face, looking for these mountain lions. And the guy alongside him, the air attack supervisor, just said simply, rotors. And he had a look, and the rotors are about 15 feet from the cliff face. And he goes, oh, okay. And just flies away. And it was. So he then said,
that must have been surreal.
Anything. It was just so surreal. And then he was just saying, is there anything you want to see or do whilst we're here? And because we didn't really know all that much, we said, just anything you can show us. So he then showed us how they calculate fire spread using aircraft, all sorts of stuff. It was an amazing 3.5-hour experience. And on subsequent trips, I've tried to blag myself into aircraft and could never do it again. And the guys over there said they've never heard of an air attack supervisor taking up people for a ride before or since. So it was one of those things, all the planets aligned, and we got to do this absolutely amazing trip. It was. I
always say shy kids don't get sweets. You've got to be cheeky enough to ask. I've been lucky enough to get into various positions onto ribbed boats and into certain buildings, and I've had a few helicopter, and you've got to be cheeky enough to ask. You've got to believe that you're sincerely interested. You've got to add a little bit of value to the situation yourself. But it's one of those
what's
jobs.
The worst they're going to do? Say no.
Yeah, absolutely. Worst thing they'll do is say no. You're not going to fucking die.
Say no. No, that's right. Yeah, and that's exactly it. We've tried it, like I said, subsequently, and we're told no, and you go, yeah, okay.
That's okay.
I've lost nothing. But imagine what you gain if they say yes.
100%.
So it was the same as over in Queensland. The first helicopter job I got at a fire was, we had a reasonably large fire that was threatening the Air Force base that was next to where we were based. And the news helicopter was flying around, and I really wanted to see where this fire was going because we wanted to put in a massive great backburn. So I got the control room to phone the newsroom and tell them to put the helicopter on the ground because we wanted to borrow it. And they go, yeah, okay. So once again, if you don't ask.
Yeah.
And so the guy, the news crew thought it was brilliant. The fire service actually wanted them to help fight the fire. And so they took us up for a 20-minute ride. And it was really handy because, you can see so much. It's like doing a 360 of any building or any fire. Except later on, when my district commander found out I'd done it, he said, if we get a bill for this flight, you're the one paying for it. But he said, well done, though.
So you came into the station commander position. Did you stay at that rank? What did you enjoy most about the rest of that time there?
I tried a couple of times to get promoted, but it was obvious it wasn't going to happen. So as soon as I accepted that was my limit of my ability, I was so pleased with it. And I just loved it. The station was really good. Like I said, everyone was on the whole happy. We did a lot of youth engagement work, which I was really proud of. Really, really pleased with the youth engagement work we did. We did it with the NHS at times. We did it with the police, the local authority, had a couple of programs. And just with teenagers, we had not the bad kids. We had ones that were, with a bit of guidance, could become good kids, if you get what I mean. Because with most youth engagement programs, they're centered at the bottom 20% of the population. The top 20% of kids get because they're achieving, but the middle 60% generally miss out on so much. So this was a program aimed at the middle 60% to raise them up higher.
I was going to say, and they're
so
the
was
ones
really good.
that actually, with the greatest respect, like with less, it's going to require less effort. You could really see a massive improvement in their life with a lesser amount of impact. Not that you want to give a lesser amount of impact, but we're all quite limited in resources. And like you say, you can do these youth intervention programs for a couple of weeks during the summer, and you really want to see somebody be able to change gears. And with somebody like that, in that middle 60%, they're almost primed for success, but they just need that next trigger. They just need that little bit that gets them over the edge, or that can inspire or motivate that action within them.
Yep. And that's what we really enjoyed about it, because a lot of teenagers, well, it's not even nowadays, but a lot of teenagers, even when we were growing up, get a bad rap. You know, the older generations go, oh, the youth of today. And really, they're not that bad, and they're not doing anything different to what we did when we were kids.
Absolutely.
So, so that was really good. But it was nice for parents to come to us and say, you know, you've been life-changing to my kids. And that was really good. So then we adapted that program to work with the NHS, because at that time, there was generally a push across the UK for fire services to work more with the NHS. I don't know whether we saw it as, you know, the NHS has a lot of money and they can help us along and we can make some money out of this. But anyway, we adapted this program, and we did a bit of paid work or commissioned work with the local clinical commissioning groups. And so that was interesting, until we found out basically our programs were going to have an effect on kids that could be measured in 10 or 20 years. But the NHS needs measures that are going to happen in the next 6 months or 12 months. And that's where it is. Yeah, because we were dealing with kids who had low self-esteem, long-term medical conditions, and were generally overweight. So by doing stuff with them now, you weren't going to see a change in a year, but you'd see that in 20 years, 10, 20 years, they're not going to be a diabetes patient and stuff like that. So, but that's not the way the NHS measures stuff.
No,
but another one we did
turn around on that return on investment, don't they?
Yeah. So we also did a stop smoking and get fit program called Quit and Get Fit with the NHS, which was really good fun. So it was adults coming to fire stations. The NHS would do their stop smoking bit, and we would do PT with them, and the two things go hand in hand. So we were getting guys in on overtime because, you know, once again, we were being paid for it. So the guys would run a PT program once a week for people to stop smoking. And that was a really good show too. We really enjoyed that. So yeah, getting back to the station, it was just a happy place to be. And it was just one of those good times in life. And in the end, it all started to change a bit. We took a hit with our crewing levels. We went down to a number that wasn't divisible by 4, so we couldn't run a traditional watch system. So we were all asked to come up with a different crewing model. And we came up with a fully flexible model where the guys basically work it out amongst themselves as to when they're coming to work, on the condition they do 149 and a half shifts per year, and the truck goes out each time with a fully competent crew. And so in the end, they really liked our fully flexible system because they could work it around their lives.
Yeah. So fostering systems are good. And sometimes they save money for services as well, to be honest. And people prefer them for a work-life balance. I think they've gotten a lot more popular.
Yeah. I think so, because our guys, the model that we came up with, or basically they came up with, was a product of what they thought would work. And so, because they came up with it, it wasn't imposed upon them. Well, the fact that we needed one was imposed upon them, but the model itself was created by them. There's a lot more incentive to make it work.
Absolutely.
Like, see, if I came to your station and said, this is the model you're going to work, you go, you've immediately got that, why should I? But if you come up with it yourself, you've got a lot more of that buy-in. And they absolutely loved it, but it was a few years of grief. It really was.
Yeah.
To go through the whole process, to get the service to agree with it, all sorts of stuff. It was difficult. But
so what age did you retire?
I retired when I turned 60. So I had a bit of toil and holidays and whatever to take. So I left the service in September and I retired officially December 2 years ago.
Wow. How was that? Because
on my last,
spent 30 years at this as a massive part of your life, and to how did you feel about the prospect of retiring? Because I always like play with the word, because I don't believe that people should ever fully retire. They'll move on to a different passion. But did you retire because for some people it doesn't make financial sense for them to stay, or was it just mandatory that you had to go at that time?
It was all sorts of stuff. To be perfectly honest, I got sick of being assessed. Because you've got your command assessments, you've got your driving assessments, you've got your fitness assessments, you've got your 2 yearly medicals. And once you get towards 60, those get more and more difficult. And it just got to the stage where it was time to go. There were a few of us dinosaurs left, but there were getting to be less and less dinosaurs. And so you've just got to appreciate the fact it's time to go. And it was just towards the end of the lockdowns of COVID. Wow. And it was just, enough was enough. But I'd always thought that I'd go at about 60. I've got half a UK pension. I've got half an Australian system that we had over there. So it was, okay, why not? And time to move on. But you really look forward to it. You really look forward to it, but then the trepidation comes in of the security blanket of your monthly paycheck, of being able to walk downstairs from your office into the mess room and be surrounded by like-minded people. It is the mess room I miss the most.
Really?
Because just the banter, the camaraderie, going to incidents. I loved going to my last incident the same amount as I loved going to my first incidents. If I could stay being a fire officer without all the bureaucracy and stuff like that, you'd think, maybe another couple of years, but it comes as a package, doesn't it?
That's the one thing that puts me off any further progression. So I'm a watch commander currently in the service that I work in. And in the past year or so, I've been encouraged by several individuals to go for my station managers and to take that next step. Now, I'm only 33. I've potentially got another 25, maybe 30 years by the time we get there, by the time me and your son get there, it'll probably be 65. And I think to myself, if I move past station commander, then I'll be off the trucks. I won't particularly be attending incidents anymore. It'll very much be managing people, resources, budgets, and I think I'll get less of that mess room analogy. I'll get less of that. I don't know. I worry that I'd lose passion for it. I always used to tell myself, I'd love to be chief fire officer one day. I didn't really understand why I said it. I think it was just ego, or I thought it would be a position where I could really influence change. And it's not that I've become pessimistic and I don't believe that anymore, but I wonder if, if you'd have made that, if you'd have been successful 5 years or 6 years, not saying they were successful, if you'd have been successful in getting promotion past station commander, do you think, and I know it's hard to say in retrospect, how do you think that would have changed your experiences with us? Because you wouldn't have had to do as many assessments anymore, but on the flip side, you wouldn't have attended as many incidents or have been able to be at the coalface with the firefighters every day.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, it was the best thing not to get that promotion because I stayed where I really, really enjoyed it. And I think as you go up the levels, you become more and more part of that bureaucracy. I found that station commander, you're top of the lower and you're bottom of the top of the higher, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
You are that filter. You are that filter between the management of the service and the delivery of the service. And depending on what type of station commander you are, you can be the umbrella for the guys who are actually delivering it, or you can just let it all flow through if you want to. So I like the idea of being that bit of an umbrella where you let some of it through, what they have to, but you are also
you're the shit
deflector. From it.
You need to be there to protect that culture.
Yeah, but also by being the shit deflector, you're copping a lot of the shit.
Yes. I imagine that's quite a lonely position to be in as well, because as much as you're part of a team, you're also not. How did you balance that aspect of it? And, not being, because again, talking about common mistakes that managers make, not trying to be everybody's friend, but also remaining somebody that's respected both for their experience, but also for their knowledge and their opinion and the way that they handle the station, I suppose.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. What we did a couple of years after I joined, we started a station commanders forum, and initially it was just so we could all get together and chat with each other and find out if we're being fed the same story, because we found that I was being told stuff that other stations weren't being told, and you think, hang on a sec, are we being
and there's nothing worse
here?
As a crew or watch commander or firefighter is going, well, they don't do that at that fucking station. Why are you making me do it?
Oh dear me, yeah.
That's why you've got to be on the same page with the other station managers.
And it was exactly that. And my basic response of, well, if you want it, you just fuck off over there. Yeah, it really doesn't mind because in reality, the whole package here will be better than the package somewhere else. But anyway, it was the station commanders started getting together, and it became the first couple of times the bitch and beef session, but after that it became a good way of the service talking to all the station commanders together. So if they wanted to introduce something or if they wanted to pass on news, they could come along to the forum and just talk to all the commanders at the same time. And after a little while, we did have a senior officer come in and say, could you please make this a little bit less of being a lion's den, because we're starting to have feedback that coming to the forum isn't the most pleasant experience that people can have. So it
removes that divide and conquer aspect of it, doesn't it? If I come and see you by yourself, then maybe I can convince you that, everyone else has been saying it's the best. And that perhaps sounds a little bit pessimistic. No, it is. It's good to have. It's good to have all those ideas in the same room.
And once again, we did have that support network within our group of, if you've got issues or problems or just wanted breakfast or a coffee with someone, you can give them a call and say, look, let's meet so and we'll sit down, we'll just rant and rave. Don't want you to do anything, just listen to what I've got to offload, and then I can go back to my station. But
very important, because it can feel like a very lonely place, I suppose.
It was a great role. I loved it. And especially when you've been there for a while. I was at Havant for about 11 years, and you become very confident in your station ground, and it probably isn't as long as people want to spend at a station, but those who spend 6 months or a year and then move on chasing promotion, are you actually doing the best thing for the station?
Yes, very true. You need that continuity, don't you, at times?
Yeah.
So tell me how you did manage to navigate this concept of retirement. Obviously, you decided that you'd done with all the assessments and all that sort of stuff, but knowing what you don't want is very different to knowing what you want or knowing what you think is next.
Yeah, but Lynn and I had we bought a motorhome back in 2009. We always said when we retired we'd buy a new one, so we upgraded to a new one, and we had great plans of going to Europe and traveling to Turkey and cruising around Turkey for a while and having a 6 month holiday. And that was the plan that COVID put paid to. So what started off as a grand plan of a big tour through Europe, we did go away quite a bit later when borders were opening. And that was always the fear whilst we were away, of we had to be careful where we were going, of not could we get into the country, but could we get out of the country?
Right.
So we did France, Germany, Austria, Slovenia, and into Italy. And it was all going pretty hunky-dory until Lynn fell over, broke her ankle, and we had to come home about 3-4 weeks early.
Selfish cow. Never did.
Oh, it's just. Well, the two questions we've been asked: did you push her, and was alcohol involved? And it was no to both of them.
No,
so,
of course.
But it was just we had got to a place in Italy where we just couldn't find what we were looking for. Okay. And we don't know what we were looking for, but it just wasn't what. We said that, right, we'll go to this village, we'll have a look around there. If we don't like it, we'll head into France. We'll spend 4 or 5 weeks in France because we love it there. And then she fell over, basically, which changed it all. But we've been back again. We've been this year we did France, Spain, and Portugal. Next year, well, I've had my holiday to Australia. Next year, we're doing Norway, Sweden for a while.
Like style.
So, it is loads
How
of traveling.
important do you place on, obviously, you're getting a lot of traveling and stuff like that, but in terms of mental and or physical stimulation, do you ever have a fear of that? Like, I recently underwent surgery and had to have a period of time at home. I started to feel that kind of social isolation creeping up the back of my neck. That sort of cognitive stimulation, felt as though I wasn't flexing that muscle anymore. Have you? Because it's a very prevalent, it's a very important thing and pertinent thing to be discussing now, because there's a lot of people retiring around this sort of period of time, and it will be something that's going through a lot of people's heads around. I don't want to become that doddery old whatever, or I don't want to. I'm worried that my mind will just start to fail me, and it is true. If you don't use it, you lose it to an extent.
The one thing I wasn't ready for is how quickly you become Dave. Dave who? Because when someone leaves your service, you go. You always joke, Pete who? It is a standing joke. No, that's it. But it actually happens. You walk out of the station with these wonderful promises of, we'll keep in touch. Nah, it doesn't happen. Especially when, considering I live in Devon and I work in Hampshire, once a year we get together, a group of them come down to Devon. We go to a holiday park, all bring the motorhomes and campers, and we have a weekend away. We promise to do it every year. And that's it. And you have the occasional phone call with mates, but that's it. Yeah. I wasn't ready for it. But not long after retired, we got 2 rescue dogs, loads of time. Best thing we ever did, or best thing I ever did. I don't think the missus agrees 100% with that. But they're big dogs, really active. I have dropped kilos in weight following these dogs everywhere. And around Devon, we've got some beautiful spots here, really beautiful. And when we go on holidays to Europe, the missus gets to lie in bed. I'll take the dogs out in the morning for an hour or two. So I get to explore places that she isn't interested in. I'll walk around the base of the castle and follow this path up a hill just to see where it goes, or take the dogs onto some deserted beach in the north of Spain. It is just absolutely amazing. I love it, and like I said, it's good for the health. I've picked up fallen into a part-time job of 3 days a week doing maintenance for a couple of business parks.
Cool.
And the glorious part about that is they give me holidays whenever I want it. I said, I want 3 months off to go here. Oh, okay. I want a month off to go to Australia. Yeah, okay. So it is ideal. As long as I'm here through the middle of summer when it's at its busiest, they're happy to let us go. So it's worked out pretty well. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And having a more physical job keeps the mental going also.
Now, your son obviously chose to follow a similar path as such, and
no, he isn't though. He isn't though. He's tried to get in the job, but he just loves your podcast.
Okay, my apologies.
No, it's quite all right. Rather than listening to music, he listens to podcasts, and he came across yours and just loved it.
He's got some fucking low standards. He needs to sort himself out.
Well, he's my son.
There's some better shit out there to listen to, folks. No, it is, and romantically, perhaps he's had that same sort of thought. I think people in the first responder community are so underrepresented, not in like a weird representative political manner. I just mean like these incredible stories. I mean, he'll have sat listening to you probably around the dinner table, for that 15, 20, 30, 40 years of your career, and that for me is so inspiring. I've done that with so many people, and I'm like, I can't be the only person that finds this interesting. And I know I'm not, like just some of the stuff and the journeys that you share. Fire service is just one of the best kept secrets of the emergency services. But so he had attempted to get in, or he'd flirted.
Oh yeah, before. Yeah. He's tried with a number of fire and rescue services, and you can only end up on so many waiting lists. Yeah. And you've just missed out and all that type of thing. And there must be thousands of really good firefighters waiting to get into the fire service. Yeah. So no, it is a shame, because he said many years ago the one wish he had was to ride on the back seat of a fire engine with me sitting in the front seat, and that would have been just what father's son wouldn't want that sort of combination.
Crikey.
So
would you still encourage people to join these days?
Oh, without a doubt. The first week that when I got to Mackay Fire Station, I was told by one of the old hands, "You've joined at the wrong time. The good old days aren't here anymore. No, it's not what it used to be." Right. So I was told that in 1991. I told our new recruit when he arrived at Havant a couple of years before I left, I said, "These are your good old days. In 40 years or whatever it is, when you retire, when you are the old dinosaur, you'll be saying it's not what it used to be to a recruit who it'll be his good old days in there." It's all we all forget the bad stuff and remember the good, which is why we have good old days.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And I also think that whilst there's things that are outside of your control, like people say, "Oh, we don't get as many jobs as we used to," and silly things. I mean, that's true to an extent, but I also use the analogy of like the military, for example. So of the military, so let's play a little game for a second. What percentage of the military do you think ever actually deploy to a conflict zone?
Oh, it would be in single figures, wouldn't it? I think it would have to be so low.
They send like something about 30%, but that includes physio and management and bloody admin and people that build the centres when they're out there. It's about 6% of people actually ever go from that then base actually out into any sort of conflict. And of the 6%, I think it's a very small amount that ever actually have contact.
Yeah.
But that doesn't stop these thousands of hours of training and drills and millions of resources deployed all over the world, and people giving all of their stories of their incredible experiences that they've had, predominantly which are simulation or training for that one day when you're needed. Whereas actually in the emergency services, whilst we may not be as in demand operationally as we once were, we still get significantly more than a lot of other incidents. And like my brother-in-law's paramedic, for example, and he envies the amount of trauma that we go to, because he says they go to a lot of sitting in people's living room talking about their medication, whereas we go to trauma. We go to collisions and incidents involving some pretty traumatic events. And I do think that whilst you can't control things like the incidents, you can control the other 95% of the job, which is the culture, which is like you were saying, do people enjoy coming to work? You know what I mean? We've got 12 hours that we're here today. Now, you might not be able to change the policy or the uniform or anything like that, but we can pretty much do whatever the fuck we want for these 12 hours. We've got some metrics to hit. The boss wants us to go and do a couple of visits. We've got to go and do some risk.
Yeah.
Where do we want to train? What do we want to have for lunch? What time do we want to have lunch? You know, what do we want to go and visit today? There is so much of those aspects. Because you'll have seen it when you'll have looked at different stations and stuff. You'll speak to one firefighter at a station and they'll say, I absolutely love the job. And someone at another station will say, I fucking hate it. It's not like it was, blah, 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 blah. Now, the only thing that's different is the people. Because pretty much everywhere, the job's very similar. The kit is very similar. The uniform, the policy, the pay. It's the people. It's the people. And that bit, ironically, is in our control. It's how are you interacting with people? Are you showing up the best version of yourself? Like you were saying about being a manager or a leader. How are you treating people? That is the bit that's in our control. And that's the bit that we all talk about.
Yeah, I think on the days when you are really down in the dumps, we all have our bad days at work. That, some of the firefighters, it's a shit job, I don't want to do this, don't want to do that. I'm there, hang on a sec. Would you mind walking across the road, having a chat to that brickies labourer over there in sub-zero degrees, pissing down rain, and just explain to him how bad your job actually is?
You'd be fucking embarrassed. You'd shut your mouth up after about 2 sentences when you go and see that road worker fucking struggling with a jackhammer with freezing cold fingers, and he's doing that every fucking day.
Yeah, and what prospects has he got?
That's it.
You are going to be on the same jackhammer every bloody day.
That's it. Yeah, that bit really baffles me. I actually think I think I suffer. Bloody hell, that's a bit of an exaggeration. Let's wind back for a minute. I think I mentally struggle because I need to see that I'm developing. And I'm not talking about promotion, but I like to feel like I'm learning something. I'm that inquisitive person. We go places, like you go on all your risk visits and stuff. I go and ask stuff about businesses, about organizations, about systems, about how everything works. I like to feel that I've learned something every day, and I chat about it with my kids at the dinner table. And I think I couldn't do what that person's doing. The person does the same thing every day. And part of me admires them for it because they're obviously living in a state of equilibrium. They obviously feel content to an extent, even if they say they might be miserable or whatever, but they can do it. As I've gotten older, I've had lots of opportunities to go and do other jobs that pay more money. And I've just said, I don't like it. It just sounds shit. And they're like, yeah, but think of the money. I'm like, but I don't, and that's a strange thing.
Yeah, but see, we are blessed in that when someone has the worst day of their life, we can go and make it better.
That's it.
And not many people can actually do that. That on a day where someone has a fire in their kitchen, to us, it's a bread and butter job, but to them, it's the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And we can go along calm, relaxed, professional, with a bit of empathy and make that day better. Not many people have that ability in their day-to-day jobs.
It's a really short reward loop, isn't it? It's a bit like when we say about the brickie. They have to put in effort my old man ran a building firm for like 40 years. They have to put in effort for a fair few months or even longer. And sometimes they won't actually see the end product. They won't see the outcome. Or somebody standing in a factory just punching holes in something or sorting cat pouches into boxes or crisps or whatever. They don't see the end reward necessarily of somebody opening it up and going, oh, these are great crisps, thanks very much. Whereas us, we go, enter into chaos, and within a couple of hours or a day or less, you can see the end result where somebody goes, when you arrived, it was chaos. Now you're leaving. I feel safe. I've been rescued. I can see that life is going to continue. And that, I think we can very quickly lose sight of how important that is, in like you feel a sense of fulfillment, you feel a sense of purpose. And also, like you said, that person is probably only ever going to call the fire service maybe once in their entire life, once or twice, and you, Dave, or whoever, will become part of that story. They'll say, yeah, I rang the fire service once, and fucking hell, what was the guy's name? It was Dave. He came and his team did this or she did that and they fixed it. That is something that I think we always need to remember, because you can see some firefighters get into jobs and it's the middle of the night, and it's the 7th call, but get a fucking hold of yourself. Yeah. wind your neck in. Remember where you are, just for a second. Not for you, not for me, not for for the rest of the people on the back of the crew, for the public who, are expecting you are about to be their entire experience of the fire service. They've never fucking rang you before, ever. Yep. You are going to be everything they ever heard about, and you're gonna be the story that they tell people. So be really good at it. Go on, just for an hour, be really good at it.
But on the other hand, there are those jobs where, especially over in Queensland, where the properties were all wooden structures. You drive past a vacant lot and say, there used to be a nice house there until we had the fire there. Yes. So they are the car park jobs. Yeah. Don't get too full of yourself. They don't all work out very well.
No, 100%. I've certainly had a fair few of them myself. We just couldn't get on top of that one, could we, fellas?
On our recruits course, the instructors told us they went to a job one day and it was beautiful Queenslander, beautiful wooden house, whatever, nice ornate, with these amazing entrance stairs leading up to the entrance to the property. They said when they built the new house, all they could incorporate from the old was the staircase. They lost the entire structure except for the staircase. But they said, we were very proud. We said, see that staircase? We saved that. But I remember, even over in Queensland, we went to one house and we pulled out their photos. That is basically all we saved. And the lady was in tears, and we said, but look at the photos we brought out. And it changed her day. So you can only do what you can. Yeah.
100%.
But wonderful.
Beautiful, my friend. Look, looking back over everything that we've just discussed, I always love to close with, if you had to try and capture in a sentence or two some of those characteristics that make for a great firefighter, what would they be?
Be happy in your job. Be happy where you are. And always place yourself in the path of opportunity, as we discussed earlier. And it's always easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission.
Oh, mate, that last one, 100%. I'm always like that. I'm like, let's just go. Come on. To us, it makes sense. Otherwise, we'll get bogged down in this procrastination of asking questions and fucking about. It's easier to ask for forgiveness and permission. Yeah, and shy kids don't get sweets. You've got to just go for those opportunities. Because people have that. They're like, well, how come Dave got a chance to do that? Or how come Dave got that transfer? He fucking asked. Yeah, he put himself in a position and said, hey, can I have a crack at that? Yeah, 100%. Go for it. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah. Dave, thank you so much for taking time out of your morning, mate. I really appreciate it. I know I've caught you in the middle of a whole bunch of travels, but I'm so glad that we were able to capture this. And a thanks to your son for sort of connecting us. Because like I said at the beginning, I love creating these kind of audible time capsules because it's moments like this that remind people that, it is a great thing that we do. Yeah, okay, it's not what it used to be, and we're facing a lot of socioeconomic challenges, but it's still a fucking great thing to be part of.
That's it. If you don't like it, go and tell a brickie how bad it is.
100%, mate. David, thank you so much for your time, my friend.
Lovely chatting, Pete.
I'll speak to you soon, my friend.
Okay, cheers, mate. Thanks a lot.
Firefighters Podcast is put together to develop, inspire, and hopefully even motivate those individuals who have chosen to serve our communities and be part of the first responder family. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield. If you have enjoyed today's episode and you want to see the podcast continuing, please head over to our Patreon page where you can support the ongoing efforts of the podcast. Please hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on whatever platform you're listening to. Please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.